One of your assignments this week is to prepare a complaint and a summons for the Bradley Smart case that we have been working on. You've been asked to prepare this by Mr. William Hamilton, your supervising attorney. Let's get started by looking at the complaint. On my whiteboard here, I have drafted an overall view of kind of what a complaint looks like. When you submit documents to the court, they're often formatted in this way, where they have the lines marked with numbers, and then they'll have two vertical lines down. That is not required for the assignment, but if you do want to go the extra mile, go for it. There are some instructions on how to do that later on in a website that I will link for you. Anyway, let's start by looking at what we have at the top. At the very top, you are going to be including the attorney name, who is going to be submitting this, which will be William Hamilton, the address and the phone number of William Hamilton. Make this up. There is no William Hamilton. And then you always want to include attorney for the plaintiff to identify him. Who is he? Right below that, we're going to have centered the court in which you are bringing the case. In the live class session, I made up the scenario that the case was taking place in Springville, California. I've never been there. I don't know what it's like there. But I did look it up, and it is in the Central District Court of California. So I am going to be bringing the case into the Federal District Court, and so that would be for the Central District of California. So that's listed right here. Now below that, we're going to have this caption. And this caption to the left is going to include the name of the plaintiff versus the name of the defendant, with plaintiff and defendant labeled. Now, the plaintiff is the person who is bringing the action, the person who is suing. And so that is Bradley Smart in this case. And then he is going against ABC Manufacturing. For purposes of the complaint, I'm assuming that Jane Robinson is the owner of ABC Manufacturing. That way we only have to worry about one defendant, where she is both the owner and the manager of Bradley Smart. Then in the middle here, we have the outside parentheses that are going down to separate this section with the parties from the label. This is a complaint. So you label what document it is that you are turning in right here. And then below that, just putting NO period, and that's abbreviation for number. You leave this blank. This will be filled in by the court once it has been submitted. Now, once you've done this caption, you will be including a jurisdictional statement, and we're going to go over that in a couple minutes. Then you're going to be including the parties, plaintiff and plaintiff's address, defendant and defendant's address, the statement of the facts, what happened, the claim, and then your request for relief. And this is where you state the wherefore plaintiff requests and what you're requesting in this lawsuit, your monetary damages. And then a demand for a jury trial, that's optional. Not everybody wants a jury trial. And then at the very bottom, the signature of the attorney, and Esquire is for attorney, and again, label it as attorney for the plaintiff. So let's get started by looking at the jurisdiction. I'm going to wipe off my whiteboard, and we are going to start. Now, the jurisdiction refers to whether or not the court has the authority to hear the case. Because sometimes federal courts will not have authority to hear state cases, and sometimes state courts are not the best places to have it, and you have to make sure you have the right state court. For example, let's say that I worked here in Arizona, and I wanted to sue someone that worked in California, but I like the rules of the court way back in Maine. I wouldn't be able to sue in Maine unless there was some other tying to Maine. You just can't randomly pick where you're going to go. So the jurisdiction means that the court can hear this, and it is the applicable law and the applicable place. So for the jurisdiction in this case, let me get my whiteboard centered. It's going to be under the United States Code, the USC. And it's going to be Chapter 28 of USC, that stands for United States Code. And then it's going to be 1331 jurisdiction. Now, what does 1331 mean? You're going to be asking. Well, 1331 is a federal question. That means that this is a lawsuit arising under federal law. And since this case, as we know from our previous case that we briefed, which was Harris v. Forklift, we know that this is asking about Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this is a federal law, not a state law. And so this is going to be a federal question here about this sexual harassment and workplace discrimination. And so to write a jurisdictional statement, what you would do is you would start out, and first of all, you always want to number every statement you make. And that way, when they're answering your complaint, they can just answer right along with what you have listed. One yes, one no. You know, it's easy for labeling, it's easy for answering. So for your jurisdictional statement, it would be something to the effect of, this court has jurisdiction under, and this is where we're going to quote what we just talked about, 28, that's Chapter 28 of the United States Code, Section 1331. Okay, and this court has jurisdiction under blah, 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 because it is a federal question. And a statement like this will suffice for your complaint right there. So this is really brief. And quickly, let's just say that for some reason this was not a federal question. It was not federal law that applied. One of the other ways to get it in federal court is Section 1332. These are the big ones. And again, this is 28 of USC, United States Code. And this is called diversity jurisdiction. And I just am going to go over this because this is what is in your textbook. And for diversity jurisdiction, there's two requirements. The plaintiff and the defendant must be residents of separate states and then the second requirement, so that's one, the second is it must be over $75,000. The lawsuit must be over that $75,000. And again, you would word that the same way, saying this court has jurisdiction pursuant to 28 USC 1332 because of the diversity, and you would probably list out these requirements. You know, the diversity of the plaintiff and defendant from being from different states and amount is over $75,000. So you would just cite to that diversity jurisdiction. Now let's get into the next part, which is the statement of facts. Oh, sorry. The next part is the parties before we jump to the statement of facts. And sometimes the parties is included before the jurisdiction, sometimes it's after. We're going to include it after. So first we're going to say plaintiff, and then you're going to include the address of the plaintiff. So the plaintiff, the name here, so that's going to be Bradley Smart. And then you're going to say resides at, and then list Bradley Smart's address. I made it up as 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street in Springville, California. And then the second thing is you're going to have the defendant. You know, and again, the name, and then you're going to put resides at, and you're going to include, you know, and because this defendant is actually a corporation, we're going to, I'm going to instead change the language instead of residing to be is a corporation incorporated in California and then say, I would say here, defendants mailing address is, and then this is probably how I would write it because we have that corporation there. And so again, you need to fill in this section about the parties and just who they are. Just identifying, you know, these are the plaintiff, this is the plaintiff, this is the defendant. And in some cases, this can be complex when you have multiple people listed as defendants or even plaintiffs. And so, you know, and again, keep numbering it. And number it, by the way, you'd want to start with number 2, 3, 4. You don't want to repeat any numbers. You want to keep the numbers running even in the different sections. You don't start over again. You keep going from the last section, even though you started with the new one. And I think I just messed that one up. Okay, so then right after that, we're going to have what I was going to get to earlier, the statement of the facts. This is where it's going to get fun, and this is where you get to start plugging in some more personalized of the information. And in the case brief that you did last week, you were really just summarizing the facts. You just wanted the key facts. Well, in this statement of the facts, you want to list all the facts. You want to list them out there. This is not a summary. This is listing, this happened on this day. This happened on this day. This happened here. So, to find the Bradley Smart interview facts, go to the material that was for the Preparing for Live class number 2. And you can pull up a PDF or the video of Bradley Smart, you know, talking about some of the facts of the case. And those are the facts that you're going to want to incorporate here. I'm going to read that to you right now, again, just for a refresher. He said, "My name is Bradley Smart. I've been working at ABC Manufacturing for approximately 4 years." So you're going to want to include a fact right there about the 4 years. And remember, sorry, my numbering, I just messed up. This would start on number 5 here because we've already done, you know, 1 for the jurisdiction, and then 2 through 4 were the parties. And so we're going to start numbering on 5 as I... Okay, so anyway, so for example, for 4 years, you know, you'd want to include that as a fact. Of course, make it a complete sentence. I'm just giving you a very, very brief rundown. The facts of Bradley Smart continue. "Over the last year, I've been reporting to Jane Robinson." Now, this is a fact I'm going to write out because this is a fact that's not in there. Jane Robinson is the sole owner of ABC Manufacturing and has been made. Okay, so I would leave that actually as a separate fact. And then I would say Jane, you know, include the last name, of course, Robinson, has been plaintiff's manager for the last year. And actually, instead of saying for the last year, I would probably put since and then list a specific date, like, like the 10th of November, and then list, the year 2013 or whatever date you want to make up. That's, again, something that you have liberty to create. And so then you're going to keep listing the facts. Let's keep reading what he says. There weren't any problems at first, but about 8 months ago, she started making several comments to me, saying that they needed a woman in my job to get it done right, and also sending suggestive jokes and comments to me via email and text message. So here, make some text up, make some facts, give some dates to these facts. I mean, give some dates to these when the problem started, to when some of the comments were made. I mean, you want to list out some of the comments. And again, you have liberty here because we don't have as many facts as might be necessary to create this case. For sure, you want to say, Miss Robinson told him in such and such month and such year that they needed a woman to get my job done right. Miss Robinson sent suggestive jokes and comments to me via email and text message. You want to just really lay out all the facts. And then here's another part that continues. I told her to stop, and she actually listened for a while, saying that she was just joking and didn't know I was offended. Now think about it. Would you really want to include that part in there that, she said, I was just joking, I didn't know you're offended? Maybe. Think of a way to put that that's beneficial to Bradley Smart. But then it all started again last month. So for sure you're going to want to include that he asked her to stop, a stop request, and that she, basically ignored it by starting up again. And again, put dates. I'm going to write dates, come up with dates, months where this happened. It's gotten so bad that I don't want to go to work anymore. Last week, she even mentioned that there were other ways to get a promotion aside from hard work. So that's an easy date to come up with last week. So as you can see, your statement of facts, you just want to list out all the facts from the Bradley Smart case that we have so far. And again, that's in the Prepare for Class 2. So after the statement of facts is where the claim is. And the claim, if you recall, the Harris v. Forklift, it's that claim under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so what you're going to put is you're going to put claim. Sorry, make sure that you can see my actual whiteboard. And usually here you have a restatement. You'll see this in some of the examples. And let's say we start here at 15. I'm not sure how many facts you're going to have, but that's a reasonable number to start at. And it would be something such as, plaintiff realleges violation, or realleges paragraphs, and these are all considered paragraphs, all the numbers. So we just label them as paragraphs, and then 1 through 14, because here we're on 15. So you're saying this is all part of that claim that we included above there, and then you're going to include by doing the acts above. Defendant has, and then this is where you're going to talk about violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so then you need to also include, plaintiff is therefore entitled to recover damages for such violation. Okay, I don't know if you can read all that. So this is what my claim would be. Now you reword it. And I would also recommend, this Title VII of the Civil Rights Act is talked about in the Harris case that you guys briefed again, and that's on page 474 of your textbook. Go look at that. You might want to cite more about that Civil Rights Act. Some of the language in there you might want to specifically state. And again, you can find the applicable language right in your textbook right there. So this would be my example of a claim. Don't copy it word for word, but summarize it in your own words to say something similar. This is just an example. And so then after the claim, you guys have the demand or the request for relief. And this does start the same. So this do start this way. Request for relief. And I'm sorry if my pen is dying here. So in your request for relief, and again, you're going to be starting all of these by having what they are. You want to break them all down into sections when you're going through your complaint. So in your request for relief, you're going to always start this with wherefore. And it's usually in all capital letters. Wherefore, this is drawing a lot of attention. This is your legalese right here. Wherefore, the plaintiff requests. And then this is where you're going to put what the plaintiff requests. And let's say that we're at like 19 by now. I'm not sure what the numbering will be on yours. But what is that plaintiff requesting? What does Bradley Smart want? I made the example of $100,000 in class. You can use that. You can make up your own. How much, these are compensatory damages in the amount of, and then put your amount. And then, it's always good to include a clause right afterwards saying basically and any more. And don't put it in this language. For example, instead of saying and any more, you could say and further relief, which the court may deem appropriate. Or you could say and all litigation fees. Or and all costs, actually, is how you would put that. And all costs, which would include, including reasonable attorney's fees. So you can write what all these costs are going to be. So this is where you're asking for what you think Bradley Smart should get, what the complaint is looking for. So, the last part, this part is optional. We'll do this part. So demand for jury trial. So in your demand for jury trial, you're just going to list out, again, you start on the number that you're at. Let's say I'm at 20. Plaintiff, and then basically you're going to repeat this. Demands a jury trial. And then, you could say for the issues in this complaint or whatever. So you're going to include that demand for jury trial if you want one. Again, that's not a mandatory thing. Lots of people do like them. But then this is mandatory. At the very end, you need the date, dated, blank of the month. So, what month you're in, and then the year, or, whatever month and year. So dated, and then fill in the date. And then you need to have a line for the signature of William Hamilton, Esquire, which means attorney. And then again, you always want to include attorney for plaintiff. So here you have that at the bottom. And then you can sometimes have a verification where you have additional signatures. And this is in your textbook if you would want to include that. That's not necessary for points, but you can have a verification of the signature. You can have like a notary, and you can also have a verification in the form of, you can have Bradley Smart, you know, Bradley Smart verifying this, you know, is the complaint he wants filed in his name, because even though the attorney's filing it, it's on behalf of Bradley Smart. So you can include a verification at the bottom. But this is your complaint. And again, just a brief view. Make sure when you have your complaint, you start with a caption. Then after the caption, you have the jurisdiction. Then you have the parties, then the facts, then the claims, then the request for relief, and then the jury trial, if you want the jury trial demand, and then the signature. So keep this in mind when you're doing it, and just make sure you have all of these, and it'll be the same format, although sometimes there will be multiple claims. For this complaint, we're just going to stick with that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now we are going to get on to summonses. Summons are the paperwork that summon the defendant to court. So this is the notice that they're going to get at the very top. You are going to write summons. And this summons, you can either do it this way, where you have summons, or you can have it more like the caption, where we had, you know, the plaintiff versus the defendant written out here, you know, and then the case number here with summons at the top, and the court name would be up here. So it's your choice which format you like more. You know, and then, so either way, you can either have a more formal or less formal. This one is less rigid as it is the summons. And so, you know, the summons would be here. And then because we're alleging that Jane Robinson is the owner of ABC Manufacturing, you know, so to Miss Robinson, owner, and then of ABC Manufacturing, you know. And then it's going to say, you know, you are hereby summoned, basically to the court, and say, you know, within 20 days after receiving this summons, you must file an answer to the complaint, and it could be 30 days. It's going to, again, depend on the court jurisdiction. But yeah, you must file this answer to the clerk's office, and it must include proof that a copy of the answer was also served on the plaintiff. And so, you know, failure to file this answer will result in a judgment against you. And that's where we are going to, you know, we're going to look into default judgments. And then again, it's going to have a date. And then this will be signed by the clerk of the court. So clerk of the court. So basically, you have the date. So basically in the summons, the key part is your, you know, informing them of the litigation, the time period to answer, what happens if there is no answer, and that's where they get the judgment against them, just in default. And then, you know, and then requesting that there be proof of answer to the plaintiff. Now this is quite a lot this week, as you can see. And so I do have some very, very helpful websites for, for you getting this information. And I've tinied these. So the first one, HTTP, 2/tiny.cc/complaint. And this is all in lowercase letters. And this is actually from the Central District Court of California, the federal court, that is just a really good explanation of how to do this complaint. And it walks you through it just beautifully. The other one for the summons that I've put together is tiny.cc-summons. And this will actually pull up a Microsoft Word document where you can adjust, the name of the court, and you can adjust the name of the parties and add the missing information to just print out your summons. And this is how lots of legal work is done, where there are actually forms. And you might actually find some of these forms in your own jurisdiction where you just have to plug in the missing information. There's one more website that I did, tiny, and that's tiny.cc, and then I believe it's SCA. So let me know if you have any questions. You have gone through this whole video, and you should be an expert now in writing these complaints. Good luck. Have a wonderful day. And always, if in doubt, Google, and remember to use your spell check.